She walked back into my house like nothing happened, like she didn't walk out with another man a year ago. But this time, I wasn't heartbroken. I was ready. And by the time she realized she was no longer in control, it was already too late. The knock wasn't loud. It was the kind you barely hear, like someone wasn't sure if they should be knocking at all. Derek looked up from the stack of unopened boxes in the corner. His new beginning had been quiet, methodical, one room at a time, one memory packed away and shelved. Until now. The door creaked open without waiting for an answer. "Natalie," he said flatly, surprised but not startled. She stood in the doorway, a suitcase at her side, and a look that didn't belong to a guest. More like someone returning to a place they once owned. Her eyes swept the room not with nostalgia, but with entitlement. "This should have been mine," she snapped, her voice already sharp. "You know what the court decided," Derek said, calm. "I don't care what a judge said. This house was ours. You know it." Her words hit the air hard, but Derek didn't react. Not anymore. The man she left a year ago might have pleaded, argued, tried to understand. But that man was gone. She dropped the suitcase like a challenge, right onto the hardwood. It echoed. "I'm not here to fight," she added, though her tone betrayed the truth. She kicked one of the boxes by the coffee table, his box labeled guest room books. It slid a few inches. She waited for him to react. "I said you could stay a few nights." "That hasn't changed," Derek said, voice even. "Now you have rules?" She laughed bitterly. There was no apology in her presence. No regret. Natalie hadn't come for closure. She came to reclaim something. Not the marriage. Power. She started walking around the room, crossing her arms like a shield. "You think just because you're the calm one, you're right? You think silence makes you better than me?" He didn't answer. She spun back toward him. "You really think you're thriving, huh? With your little routines, your tidy life?" "I made one mistake, Derek." "One." "You made a choice," he said, still not rising to her bait. "And so did I." Silence settled, heavy. Not the kind that heals. The kind that makes a room feel too full for two people who don't belong in it anymore. "This house isn't about power. It's about peace. I'm not giving that up again," he added. For a second, her face faltered. Just for a second. That night, she didn't leave. By morning, she was humming in the kitchen like it was Sunday in 2019. Like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't walked out of that front door with another man's hand on the handle of her suitcase. Derek stood in the hallway watching. She didn't see him. She was wearing one of his old shirts, moving easily. Too easily, like she'd never left. "You still take your coffee with cinnamon?" She called over her shoulder when she finally noticed him. He paused. "Yeah." She smiled faintly and set a mug on the counter. "Thought so." She made breakfast. His breakfast. Avocado toast, eggs, everything right. The food tasted familiar, but not safe. They ate in silence. Her eyes stayed on him more than the food. "You still play your Sunday playlists?" she asked like it was small talk. "No." "That's a shame. You used to say it kept you grounded." He didn't respond. After breakfast, she folded laundry, his laundry, like it was a kindness, like it hadn't once been an obligation she resented. "You always overdry these," she said, holding up one of his shirts. "I used to tell you that." "You don't have to do that." "I don't mind," she shrugged. "It's nice doing normal things again." "Normal?" Derek echoed. That word stuck. She left voluntarily, walked away with her head high, certain she'd found something better. And now she was folding laundry, humming his songs, cooking his meals, like all she needed was proximity to make the past untrue. That evening she made spaghetti, even lit a candle. They sat across from each other like they used to, physically close, emotionally gone. "How's work?" he asked, more out of habit than interest. "It's okay," she said, twirling pasta. "Feels quieter without the chaos of us." He didn't reply. Natalie kept the conversation going. Harmless anecdotes, updates about her mom, her favorite show. But it wasn't about connecting. She was looking for a foothold. After dinner, he went back to unpacking boxes while she lingered. Eventually, she stood in the doorway. "You always had a way of making a space feel like yours," she said softly. He didn't respond. "I know it's weird," she added, "but doesn't this feel right? Like we never should have left this. Derek looked up for the first time in hours. She wasn't visiting. She was testing the waters, auditioning, and he wasn't buying it. By Thursday, Derek came home later than usual. Not intentionally, just work, traffic, and a general reluctance to step inside a house that no longer felt entirely his. The porch light was on. Inside, the smell of stew hit him first. His mother's recipe. Natalie stood at the stove like she'd never left. She turned, smiled. Long day? He nodded, walked past her to get a glass of water. The kitchen had been rearranged, just slightly. Nothing obvious, but enough to signal ownership. I didn't want to text, she said. You looked off this morning, thought I'd cook something that felt like home. He said nothing. She slid a bowl in front of him. The stew tasted right. He didn't ask how she remembered. He didn't have to. She'd been preparing this move long before she walked through his door. Halfway through the meal, she sat across from him. You used to talk to me more, she said, chin resting in her palm. Back when you worked downtown, you'd unload your whole day at this counter. Derek didn't look up. We were always good at comforting each other. That sentence stopped his hand midair, because she wasn't wrong. Back then, they'd known how to be soft, to laugh at the right moments, to hold tension like a shared burden. But that version of them had died the night she walked out. I'm not trying to push, she continued. I just thought maybe a warm dinner might help. You look tense. He nodded. No thank you. No conversation. Just a signal that he'd heard her. She stepped closer while he rinsed his dish, standing just close enough to be felt. I know this isn't how you plan things, but maybe this is what we needed. Time apart, a little clarity. He turned to her then, fully, and saw it. This wasn't remorse. This was calculation. She wasn't rebuilding herself. She was trying to rebuild him, the version that missed her, that wanted her back. Good night, Natalie. Her smile faded for just a second. Good night, Derek. But that night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the decision formed with precision. He'd had enough of the subtle games, the silent takeover. She wasn't going to leave on her own, so he made a call. Let me get this straight, Belle said, half laughing. You want me to come stay and pretend to be your girlfriend? I need space, he replied. Natalie doesn't take no for an answer unless there's a reason. I'll be there tomorrow. Belle showed up like a gust of fresh air, confident, loud, and exactly the opposite of Natalie. She rang the bell. Natalie opened the door before Derek got there. You must be Natalie, Belle said brightly, stepping inside. I've heard things. Natalie blinked. And you are? Belle, she said, sliding her arm through Derek's. Derek's girlfriend. For the first time since she returned, Natalie didn't have a response ready. Later, as they sat in the living room, Belle played her part perfectly, laughing too loudly, teasing Derek just enough, owning the space like she had every right. Natalie passed through once, offered tea with a tight smile. We're good, Belle said sweetly, not even turning around. The next morning, Natalie moved stiffly through the kitchen, her mask of politeness still on, but it no longer fit. Belle walked in, ruffled Derek's hair. Morning, babe. Hope we didn't keep you up, she added, her tone all sugar. Derek snores like a dying moose. Derek nearly choked on his coffee. Natalie didn't answer, but her silence had a new shape, raw, almost stunned. By day 2, the questions started, not obvious ones. Natalie knew better than that. She played it cool. So, how long have you two been together? Belle answered without missing a beat. A few months. Oh, Natalie said. Already sharing a house? Belle smiled. We move fast. When it's right, it's right. Natalie looked at Derek. He's never been the type to fall quickly. Belle sipped her juice. Maybe he just needed the right climate. Natalie didn't reply. Later that day, Derek overheard them in the living room. Natalie's voice was light but pointed. You seem really comfortable here. Belle blinked. Shouldn't I be? Derek invited me. Of course, it's just surprising to see him let someone in again. So soon. Belle leaned forward. Her voice remained calm. You know what's surprising? That someone who signed divorce papers is still living here. Silence. Natalie didn't answer. When Derek entered, she stood up with a forced smile. Peachy, she said, then left the room. She's starting to crack, Belle said afterward. That look she gave me? She's unraveling. Derek nodded. Saturday night, Natalie made a last attempt. I thought maybe we could do a movie night. Like old times, she said, placing popcorn on the counter. Derek didn't respond right away. Belle stood, stretching. Actually, we're heading out. Dinner plans. That hadn't been discussed, but Derek followed her lead. Natalie's voice dropped. That's too bad. I thought maybe we could. We need the night. Belle cut in, gently but firmly. As they left, Derek glanced back. Natalie stood in the hallway, her expression brittle. She wasn't losing the house. She was losing her last illusion, that proximity would fix what she broke. In the car, Belle glanced over. You saw it, right? She's unraveling. She came back thinking I was waiting for her, Derek said, but I was just waiting to heal. They drove aimlessly, laughing. No pressure, no ghosts, just relief. When they returned, the house was dark. Natalie had gone to the guest room. One lamp glowed in the living room like a weak apology. Belle met Derek's eyes. She's not done. I know, he replied, but he also knew something had shifted. Natalie had played every card. Nostalgia, routine, even pity. Now she had nothing left but reality, and for the first time, that scared her more than losing the house. Sunday came quiet, but not peaceful. Natalie was in the kitchen again, not cooking, just cleaning what didn't need it. Her movements were precise, rehearsed. She wiped the counter 3 times, the same spot. Derek walked in, poured coffee. She didn't look at him. You really didn't want to stay last night, she asked, voice low. No, he said, I didn't. She nodded once. No response, no pushback. But the stillness in her posture said she was unraveling inside. That night, he found her sitting on the living room floor in front of the TV. The screen was dim, the volume low. He didn't need to ask. He knew the music, their wedding video. He stood behind her, unseen. His younger self spun her across a rented dance floor. She didn't move, just stared. Like if she looked long enough, it might take her back. He didn't say a word, just walked past, got a glass of water, and let the video play. In the morning, the mood in the house had changed again. This time it wasn't subtle. It was tight, like a wire pulled too far. Derek stepped onto the patio, clippers in hand, a task to stay busy. Then the sound hit, sharp, loud. The guest room door slammed open. Natalie stood in the doorway, phone in one hand, shaking. This, she hissed, holding the phone up, is Belle's Facebook? He didn't answer. She's your sister, Natalie snapped. You let me believe. I never said she wasn't, Derek replied calmly. You said she was your girlfriend. Her voice cracked. You invited yourself back into my life. I told you it was temporary. You didn't listen. You let me believe you moved on. You let me embarrass myself. You played along. He didn't flinch. I created space. You ignored it. You let her touch you, joke, act like she belonged here. All so I'd feel like an outsider in my own life. No, he said, so I could reclaim mine. She stared at him like he'd slapped her. You really hate me that much. I don't hate you, he said quietly. I just don't want to go back. Tears filled her eyes, fast and angry. You had every right to be mad, but this was cruel. You're not the victim here. I watched our wedding video 2 nights ago, she shouted. I cried over us. And you? What were you doing? Laughing behind my back? You don't get to rewrite the story, Derek said. You left. I survived. She turned and slammed the door so hard the window shook. Belle appeared on the patio a moment later, silent. Derek looked at her. She knows. And? She's cornered. She's going to lash out. What now? No more games. The knock came the next day. Not angry this time. Just tired. Natalie stood in the hallway, arms folded. Her face was pale, eyes swollen. She looked like someone who'd lost a fight she didn't even know she was in. I'm not here to argue, she said. Derek let her in. They sat across from each other. The couch, the place where they once decided on paint colors, bills, vacation plans. I've been thinking, she said, about us, about what I did. I handled it wrong. I was scared. I left because I thought I needed something else. I thought we'd find our way back eventually. He stayed silent. But I see you now. You're lighter. Even when you're tired, you're not carrying me anymore. Still no response. She took a breath. I know pretending we were fine was selfish. I just didn't want to lose everything. You were my safe place, Derek finally spoke. You made a choice, and so did I. She nodded. I know. I just hoped, maybe, this wasn't the end. He looked around. Everything they'd built was still here. The table she once painted, the photo by the doorframe. But it didn't feel like theirs anymore. There's nothing left, he said. She covered her face with her hands. Sobbed real this time. Not performative, but Derek didn't move. Not out of cruelty, but because he had already grieved her and healed. I wish I could go back, she whispered. I don't, he replied. She nodded, stood, walked to the guest room. Slowly, like she finally accepted the truth. The next day, she was folding laundry. Calm, focused, like any other Thursday. Derek stepped in, handed her an envelope. What's this? She asked, confused. You've been served. Her hands trembled as she opened it. A restraining order petition. Legal.final. For what? She asked. False cohabitation, emotional coercion, refusing to leave property awarded by the court. She stared at him, betrayed. You're really doing this. I asked you to leave, he said. You didn't. She stepped back, envelope clenched. You could have just said it. I did, he said. The first night. She didn't cry this time, just lowered her gaze. Quiet, defeated. And then without another word, she walked away. Not out the door. Not yet, but she understood. The rules had changed. She didn't belong here anymore. The knock came just after 9 a.m. Sharp, professional. Derek opened the door to find a uniformed sheriff's deputy standing there, paperwork in hand. Morning, the deputy said. I'm here to serve a formal restraining order to Natalie Harlow. Is she present? Derek nodded and stepped aside. Natalie appeared almost immediately. She was already dressed, her suitcase beside her. No shouting, no denial, just a quiet, measured nod. She had been expecting this. Maybe not when, but definitely how. The deputy explained the procedure. Tone flat, matter of fact. Natalie didn't interrupt. She listened, asked no questions, and signed the acknowledgement form with a hand that trembled slightly. I won't fight it, she said quietly. She turned to look at Derek, who stood silently by the entryway. I didn't think it would end like this. She wasn't asking for sympathy. It sounded more like she was reading the ending of a story she hadn't realized was already written. Then, unexpectedly, she walked to the wall near the door. The framed wedding photo, the one they had both silently agreed not to touch since the divorce, hung there, still crooked. She straightened it, gently, then let her hand fall away. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what I cost us, she said. Derek didn't reply. Not because he was angry, but because he didn't want to give false comfort. There was nothing left to preserve, not for him. She picked up her suitcase, stepped toward the threshold, then stopped. Is there any part of you that still loves me? She asked. Derek met her eyes. I'll always care about who we were, but that's not who we are now. She nodded. That was the last piece she needed to hear, the one she had refused to accept, even when everything else had been stripped away. Then she walked out. The deputy followed, keeping a respectful distance. Derek stayed in the doorway until the car pulled out of the driveway. Natalie didn't look back. He didn't expect her to. He closed the door slowly. This time it didn't feel like shutting someone out. It felt like drawing a line finally. The silence in the house wasn't oppressive now. It wasn't heavy. It was still, clean. The kind of silence you earn. He stood there for a while before walking over to the wall. Without hesitation, he took the wedding photo down, placed it in a box, not out of spite, just because it was time. Later that afternoon, he brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen counter. No background noise, no commentary, just peace. Belle returned around sunset. She stepped inside, saw the box by the wall, saw Derek sitting there, and said nothing at first. She poured herself a drink, leaned against the counter. She gone? Yeah, Derek said. You okay? Better than I thought I'd be. They sat in silence. Not the kind that waited to be filled, but the kind that settled because everything that needed to be said had already been said. You know she's probably going to call you again, Belle said finally. I know, he replied. What'll you do? Nothing, Derek said. That chapter's closed. Belle nodded, then smiled. Well, I was thinking of heading out tomorrow. Give you your space back. Derek looked up. You don't have to rush. I know, she said. But you're not in crisis mode anymore. You don't need a buffer. He smiled faintly. Thanks for showing up. She grinned. Always. The next morning, Belle left. A quick goodbye, a hug, and she was gone. Derek stood on the porch for a minute, watching the street, then went back inside. Alone now, but not empty. He moved through the house like someone rediscovering their own territory. Rearranged the kitchen back to the way he liked it. Took the extra blankets off the couch. Cleaned the guest room. Just once, then closed the door. In the following days, things felt normal. Not the forced normal Natalie had tried to create, but genuine normal. Work picked up. Derek started running again, made calls he'd been avoiding, signed up for a photography class he'd once mentioned, then forgotten. It wasn't about distraction, it was about direction. Then about a week later, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a photo, a candid shot from their wedding day. Natalie had scribbled something on the back. We weren't always broken. I hope you find someone who never forgets that. No threats, no plea for a second chance, just a quiet acknowledgement of what was lost. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. He burned the note in the fireplace that night, watched the edges curl and turn to ash. Not because he was angry, but because he didn't want to keep holding on to a version of himself that didn't exist anymore. Closure didn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it looked like waking up and realizing you didn't check your phone for a message that never came. Sometimes it was drinking coffee in your own kitchen and not bracing for someone else's mood. Sometimes it was just breathing without remembering how you used to suffocate. Derek knew now. Peace wasn't passive. It was a choice, a boundary, a hard-earned, quiet kind of strength, and he wasn't giving it up for anyone. 3 weeks had passed since Natalie left, and Derek hadn't heard a word. No texts, no emails, no sudden visits or accidental voicemails. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was confirmation. The house had changed, not in layout, but in atmosphere. No more second-guessing where to stand, what to say, or whether the peace would last. It was steady, predictable in the best way. Derek returned to old routines, but not all of them. Some had belonged to a version of himself that no longer fit. He replaced the coffee mugs, donated the last of the things they bought together, changed the locks, not out of fear, but to close a loop. Then one Saturday morning, he drove to a small storage unit across town. Inside were a few boxes marked Natalie, items from the marriage she'd left behind, an old journal, mismatched kitchenware, a few keepsakes she never asked to reclaim. He left the key at the front desk with a note, "Pick up when ready, I won't be there." There was no need for another confrontation, no need for final words. She'd spoken them already, and so had he. Back home, Derek opened his laptop and drafted a new will. Not because he expected anything to happen, but because for the first time in years he wanted everything in order. It felt right. He left the wedding photo out of the document. It wasn't relevant anymore. That night, he sat on the back porch, sipping tea, the wind calm. He heard a neighbor's kid laughing next door, the kind of spontaneous sound that reminded you life moved on even when yours had stalled. He didn't feel behind anymore. Belle called the next day. "You're really not a mess," she joked. "I'm shocked." "I already did the hard part," Derek said, before she ever showed up again. "Yeah, but seeing her again, living with her, pretending, most people would have caved." He paused. "That's what she was counting on. Guess she forgot who you are." "No," he said. "She just remembered who I used to be." They hung up, and Derek sat for a while, realizing something he hadn't put into words until now. He hadn't just resisted going back. He had outgrown the temptation. Forgiveness had never been the issue. He had forgiven her long ago, in his own quiet way. But forgiveness didn't mean return. It didn't mean reopening doors that had been shut for a reason. It meant understanding why something broke and choosing not to break yourself trying to fix it. The restraining order wasn't about punishment. It was about boundaries, something Natalie had never respected. It was Derek's way of saying, "This is my life. You don't get to rewrite it just because you regret your choices." 2 weeks later, a letter arrived, not from Natalie, from her attorney. A simple confirmation. Natalie would not contest the order. She had secured a new residence and would not be seeking any contact moving forward. The file was closed. He placed the letter in a folder and filed it away, then deleted her number from his phone for the last time. No more contingency plans. No more just-in-case scenarios. That evening, Derek started writing again, something he hadn't done in over a year. Not a journal, not a letter, just thoughts, stories, ideas. His first line was short. Some people return to haunt. Others return to be forgiven. But the hardest ones are the ones who return pretending nothing ever happened. He didn't know where the story would go, but he didn't feel stuck anymore. The next morning, he saw the crooked frame near the entryway, the one Natalie had straightened just before leaving. He stared at it for a moment, then finally took it down. He didn't smash it. He didn't bury it. He simply removed the photo, slid it into a manila envelope, and placed it in the back of the closet. Not out of fear, but because it no longer had power. It was part of the past, not a wound, not a regret, just something that once mattered. Then he stood in front of the blank space on the wall, and for the first time in years, he started planning what would go there next. Love requires honesty, respect, and choice every single day. Once trust is broken, healing isn't about reopening old doors. It's about rebuilding stronger walls and clearer boundaries. Natalie thought presence could replace apology. That routine could replace regret. She came back assuming the past was enough to buy her a future. But Derek understood something she didn't. Peace is not given. It's earned and protected. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't manipulate her downfall. He just refused to be pulled backward by someone who walked away on purpose. Sometimes the most powerful ending isn't dramatic. It's final. It's a quiet decision to move on fully without anger. To choose peace over history. To let go, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself more.